It's okay, it takes time. I know
Welcome back to Strong. I'm so excited to bring another incredible guest. Today, we are zooming out to Toronto, Ontario, Canada, where we're going to be meeting with Malek. Welcome, Malek. It's so great to have you with me today.
there's love
Thank you, Maria. It's really great to be here with you. Thank you so much for the invitation.
I'm so excited to be talking to you, and I think what I'm even more excited about is how I came across your Instagram handle. I was doing a search and looking for fathers of daughters, and that's exactly what I came across. And what I noticed in your account that I haven't noticed in many others was the authenticity of the posting that you were doing. And I definitely want to get into that and talk about what that journey is like for you and what made you think about creating an Instagram account in that kind. But before we do that, I thought we could just get to know the man behind the figure of father. Malik, tell us a little bit about who you are and what brings you to hashtag strong.
Okay, so where should I start from? I was born and raised in Jordan, Middle East. I moved to Canada 5+ years ago, and I was a normal guy most of my life. Maybe still, I don't know, but so I've been through really so many experiences in my life. Like it felt like the universe has been preparing me to where I am right now, exactly to do that. This project you mentioned. So I call my project Mighty Daughters. It's targeting fathers of daughters, is to teach fathers of daughters how to raise strong and resilient daughters through the power of fatherhood. But like there's so many things happen in my life that they brought me to this point. So my dad, he's a very old school, mentality guy. He raised me the old school way, and I hated it when I was young. And I always thought, when I'm gonna grow up, I'm gonna be any kind of dad, but not this one. I didn't know what I wanted to be, but like not the way my dad. He loves me, he's a great person, but this is how he knew to do things, and I knew it was wrong because I struggled with it. And uh, once I became a father, I became so passionate for my daughter. I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I wanted to be a great dad, but like most of the dads, I always been lost. I didn't know what to do. I don't know. There's so many books about parenting. It's so overwhelming that I didn't read any book. I wanted to read so many books. I was so excited, but then it's so overwhelming. And I stayed in that position for some time until almost 3 years ago. I was attending an event in Toronto, and they had an event, and there was sponsors, and one of the sponsors was organization fights human trafficking. Back then I didn't know what is that, but that presentation was life changing for me. I learned how people exploit mainly young girls, how they use them in very terrible ways. And I took it really personal. Like, I have a daughter, I want to protect her. So I started looking online how to protect my daughter from human trafficking. But to my surprise, most of the resources were either how to find if your daughter being trafficked or how to help her after that. But there isn't much about prevention. So I started doing my homework just to protect my daughter. I volunteered with that organization that gave the presentation to help them, with fighting human trafficking. So I got a very intensive training. I understood the psychology happens behind the human trafficking, how the traffickers look for victims. And it's always about them picking vulnerable young women, but like there isn't much talk about what makes someone vulnerable, and it always caught my attention. And the more I learn about vulnerable people and vulnerable kids, the more I realized I'm one of them. Oh my god. And like I make so many realizations. This is why I was doing that. Like, for example, my parents, most of my life, they blame me because I have toxic friends. I always pick up bad friends. I didn't mean to do that. It just, these are the only people who wanted to hang out with me at school. But once I dug deep into this, I learned that I was a people pleaser. As a natural result of that, toxic people love people pleasers because they're always gonna say yes. They don't want to give them mad. I don't, as a people pleaser, I'm gonna be lacking personal boundaries. I'm gonna be lacking, confidence. So those are the people who wanted to hang out with me because they wanted to take advantage of me. And for my parents, it's just me picking up, bad friends. So I learned so much about it. I learned what makes a girl vulnerable, and I found that 95% of the so what makes a girl vulnerable is missing needs, emotional, mental, physical needs. And I found that 95% of these needs can be fulfilled by her dad. So, I'm a guy who likes to focus on what I can control. So I can't control who my daughter is going to run with at school, at work, in the bus station, in the subway station, but I can control how to raise her up. So most people, they fight human trafficking by, asking the government to take more steps toward that, to change laws. I decided to take different approach where, I'm gonna focus on what I can control. I can control how to raise my daughter, how to prepare her, teach her about healthy versus toxic people and relationships, teach her about personal boundaries, about consent. So once I realized this, I was like, "Oh my God, this is too good! I gotta share it with the whole world." And I quit my job 4 months ago, and I'm working now on launching my program very soon to start teaching other dads about it.
So tell me, I think it's incredible what you're doing, but I want to dive deeper into Malek. So let's put the role of father to the side. Let's put the mission to the side. I think what's really important is to understand Malek before we can really understand the mission behind the project. So talk to us a little bit more about people pleasing, because I think this is a very common characteristic that we see in young people. They're constantly trying to fit in with their peer group. And by doing that, they're also pleasing or trying to please other people. And like you said, they're struggling with those boundaries. You said that when you were younger, that upon that reflection, that you remembered, you know what, I think that was my character. So to help us understand, what does that look like through Malek's eyes as a younger teenager?
So first of all, it sucked to be people pleaser because I always find myself in awkward situations, in embarrassing situations, or in just like losing friends. And I don't know why. Sometimes I have emotions I cannot even express. I only discovered I was people pleaser last year when I went to a therapist and I was telling her, you know what, there is something wrong. I would meet someone and with a couple of altercations, I'm like, I find things getting weird. I don't know. People doesn't want to hang out with me anymore. I told her, I'm trying to be mindful, but I don't know. There's something wrong. So when I went with her over my life stories, she told me, well, Malik, you're a people pleaser. And she explained to me, so she had a Middle Eastern background as well. So she understands where I come from. And this is big part of this coming from the Middle Eastern culture where they raise us not to respect the elders. You always listen to your uncle or aunt or your grandparents. Whatever they say, you always say yes. When someone hits you, you just say, okay, I forgive you. Be nice to people. So we're being raised to be people pleasers. And I always talk to my neighbors here in Toronto, like we talk about work. I find almost all of them, they're saying, well, these Canadian people, they work from 9 to 5. Nobody even dares to ask them to do anything after working hours. But they ask me, and I always do it. Why? Because we're people pleasers. We lack personal boundaries. So this is how it looks like. Just sometimes people start taking advantage of us, but we don't want to get them mad. I'm still trying to deal with this because it's programmed. And like I'm 32 years old now. For 30 years or 31 years of my life, I was programmed not to get anybody mad, to the point where I started compromising my interests or my career. So at work, sometimes, I would have a toxic manager who would start asking me things are not fair, or things does not make sense, or they would ask me to do them, they don't ask other people, and I always say yes because I don't want to get them mad at me. And it might be simple stuff, but with time it's going to accumulate. I found myself to the point where I'm depressed, or I don't even know what was going on.
So, what was it like for you to move from Jordan to Canada? What was that cultural difference like for you?
It was one of the hardest things I did in my life. And like, you talk about resiliency a lot, and I didn't have any resiliency. So my dad is a businessman. I grew up under his umbrella. People consider me spoiled. Maybe I was, but he was very mentally abusive, and that's the side nobody saw. So I he made every single decision for me in my life. Even, like, whatever decision, career path, I didn't have to think about it. Okay, I'm growing up to continue my father's legacy and take over his company, what he started like 20 years ago. So I went to college. I studied 5 years engineering with one goal. Okay, I gotta, help my dad. Once I graduated, I was miserable, and like for 2 years I was depressed. I was not happy. And one time I was listening to a podcast or an interview, and someone mentioned about loving your job. And I was like, wow, is that even an option? Can I love what I actually do every day? Oh my God, that sounds nice. So I ended up moving to Canada 5 years after graduating. So when I moved, I used to say I moved because I'm looking for a better life for myself, for my daughter, for my wife. But I think I really did it because I needed to get separated from my dad, who was controlling. Even after getting married and being an adult man, he still would make decisions on my behalf. He has not given any space. So and even the 5 years I worked for him, I was basically managing his employees, looking after things. I didn't really have any solid professional experience. Once I moved to Canada, it was a big shock on so many levels. I didn't speak English. I barely spoke English. I don't have, I wanted to apply for jobs. I don't know what to apply. I don't have any experience. Like, I've been boss since I graduated in my father's company, running after employees. Why you were late? Why did you leave without, asking me? It's just, this is what I did for 5 years. And I was like, what should I do? For the first month or two, almost every night, I would wake up at 2, 3 a.m., freaking out, looking where I am. Like, I need like a minute just to realize where I am. Oh my God, I'm in Canada. I would look from the window to realize where I am. And like, I would say, what the hell did I do to myself? Why am I here? Why did I leave everything? I had an apartment, I had a car, I had a nice paying job. Why am I here? Then, with time, I keep reminding myself, I'm very ambitious, and I knew I couldn't, do the things I want to do back home. So it was really tough. For the first year, my full-time job was delivering pizza and doing Uber. And that was really hard, even for my ego, because, I graduated, I was working for my dad, traveling around the world. So coming now to that, be at the bottom of the chain again and doing, basic jobs. But it was amazing, like with these experiences, they started building resiliency, I started building toughness, I started having a better eye on the world.
Wow. And what you're saying is very common. I hear this all the time in my careers practice when I'm working with professionals, especially professionals who move from their home country to a country like Canada. Very often they do have to let go of their ego because they have to let go of the career that they're so experienced at doing, and accept to join a new culture, a new community, and sometimes that means letting go of a career and having to find yourself again. When you were doing that, what was it like in that relationship with with your new, in your new home with your wife and your daughter, that must have been a really vulnerable time for you. And I think that's also something that we don't hear enough of, is how do we find resilience? So we talk about resilience all the time, and I don't think resilience is something you ever learn officially or formally. I really believe that it's something that you learn by reflecting backwards and saying that experience really taught me how to be resilient. How was
That's
that for you? I mean, what was that experience like in your relationship? And at the same time, you had a baby that you were wanting to be that great father that you were hoping you could become.
it was extremely hard. So we barely had any savings. Like we had maybe $15,000 that we spent in the first month, and that what was it. For the first year in Canada, we were at the point, if I don't work tonight, we're not gonna have food at the table tomorrow. I had each month to save money on the side to be able to pay the rent. It was really hard, and we couldn't afford to pay for a daycare, and my wife was going to school for her master's degree, so I couldn't even have any day job. This is why delivering pizza and doing Uber worked for me, because for the daytime I would stay and take care of our daughter. Once my wife comes from her university, I would be ready, dressed in my pizza driver, and once she enters the doorstep, I immediately leave and go for my shift till like 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning. And that was my life for like 7 or 8 months. And after that, we were in London, Ontario at that time. Then we moved to Toronto, and it was much harder because the rent doubled and the income even decreased, because delivering pizza in Toronto is not as good as the other cities around. Because back then, London, Ontario didn't have any of those delivery apps such as Uber Eats or other apps. So like there was only one delivery option, pizza. So it was paying well. Once I moved to Toronto, there's so many options, so it's not paying that much anymore. So I was working two jobs, working 14 hours. But going back to that relationship, it was extremely, extremely challenging. And I think these circumstances were choice, the quality of partners is like, we're going through this. Are we gonna help each other out, make compromises, and just support each other? Or we're gonna, start making demands and complain and make things worse than they are? So it's definitely harder, but it's resiliency. It's all about going through adversity and coming stronger on the other side. So it was definitely hard, but yeah, I'm happy it worked out.
So looking back at that time, what did you learn that you want to be able to teach to your daughters?
Uh, Not to be scared to do scary things, because I was terrified leaving my comfort zone. I always lived under my dad's umbrella, and suddenly I came here and I'm on my own. And maybe I had a small advantage, which is I always knew I have the option. If things does not work out, I can go back home. But for me, I didn't want, I was willing to do anything not to go back home. Like when I was delivering pizza, I was saying, I don't know what is going on. Like I'm much happier now. Even though I'm making less money, it's less secure. I'm happy. So now I realize it because I had more personal freedom. I was finally, in control of my own life. But yeah, definitely, if anything I want to communicate to my daughter, go after it. And we can never grow if we stay in the same position. We only grow if we put ourselves out, if we make ourselves vulnerable. And I mean, what is the worst thing can happen? Like I like, one of the things I read in the 4 Hour Week book, Work Week book, by Tim Ferriss, is whenever you want to do something and you're really scared, just write down what are the worst case scenarios if you do that thing, and how would you deal with them. And most of the time you're going to find that it's not really as bad as you thought. So for me, I always thought, if things go really bad, I can go back home, even though I knew inside I'm never gonna go back home, like at least not with that terms, working under my dad's umbrella.
So 5 years on, here you are, you're sitting and talking to me. about your journey. And you're also really passionate about helping other fathers to make sure that they're raising resilient daughters. Now, I know that you talked about the eye-opening presentation that you listened to, and because you were a father, I think it really struck a chord for you that, you know, they're talking about young women and women being taken advantage of. But, you know, for somebody watching this, they might think that's such an extreme situation. Why would that even be a likelihood for a daughter growing up in Canada? So I think for parents whose children live abroad and they're traveling to the West for university, and I think even sons, I don't believe that it's only one gender that's more vulnerable. I think women tend to get more attention because society still shows that they're the weaker or the more vulnerable gender. But I think it is equally scary for parents of both sons and daughters. But somebody watching this will be like, come on, Malek, that was a really extreme situation. You know, what's the likelihood of that happening? But I think in what you were saying, being a people pleaser, for example, you don't need to be in that hostile environment. I think it can be very challenging for a young boy or a young girl in an everyday situation. So what have you learned now through this journey of helping other fathers in terms of raising resilient daughters, but we can also transfer into raising resilient sons as well?
Yeah, great question actually. So when I started my project, I used to say I'm doing this because I wanted to fight human trafficking, but as you said, it's a very extreme situation, and most of the people I talked to, they didn't even know what a human trafficking is, like myself 3 years ago, and I found that people don't relate to it. So this is, you know, like when I describe my course, I don't even mention human trafficking, but that was the trigger for me. So let me take a step back here. So my purpose right now is fighting abuse, exploitation, and manipulation because I suffered from these most of my life and I hate them. And I hate to see someone being taken advantage of, someone being used. I start boiling whenever I hear about these stories about someone taking advantage of other person. I start boiling from the inside because I've been there. Maybe, thankfully, not as extreme as trafficking, but still, I know how to be vulnerable and being taken advantage of, and at the same time, making being feel guilty for it. This is the problem with those exploiters. They always make their victim feel they deserve it, feel that they brought it to themselves. So through my journey, to build this course, which didn't even start that way, I found, as you said, human trafficking is the extreme case scenario, but there are way more other risks boys and girls gonna be facing, and the same things that make someone vulnerable to human trafficking is the same things that make someone vulnerable to other stuff. One of the things blew my mind all the time and drive me crazy: domestic violence. We always hear about that lady who her husband beat her to death. And then the stories come out that she's being beaten from him for like years. It always, make me wonder what would make someone take this for all these years and not speak up. What makes them not stand up for themselves? That would drive me crazy. But finally, I understood, the psychology behind it, because those victims, they're being made to feel guilty. They feel they deserve what they got, or sometimes they have no other options. Their families would not, stand up for themselves. Many victims, they get exploited, and then they feel ashamed to talk about it. They're afraid what people are going to talk about me. So you're right. A human trafficking is the extreme case scenario, and this is how I always describe it. But there's so many other risks facing our kids, such as, I keep saying this in Canada. The last thing I want is to raise my daughter and she grows up, and then, I put my blood and sweat to give her the best life, and then some bad person comes to marry her and make her life miserable. We hear about this all the time. Toxic boyfriend who's making the girl's life miserable. One time, like I watched a video about a girl who went to the vet and she pretended her dog is sick, so only she can access people, and she wrote them on a post-it note, "Please call 911. He has a gun." Like, what would make someone to reach to that point of desperation? And I found that if I teach my daughter about, toxic people, like, we're already gonna start preventing these people from getting into her life. Even if they, get into her life, they're gonna be just on the surface. She's not gonna have deep relationships with them, whether they're boys or girls. Every day at school, she has some, I don't want to call them toxic. They're still kids, but there's this friend at her classroom. One day she want to be friend with my daughter. The next day she says, "I don't want to be friend with you anymore," and my daughter would melt down and she feels sad about it. While there are other girl who always want to be nice to my daughter, so I always try to explain to my daughter, "Look, this girl, she's always nice to you. She's a good friend. This girl, she always makes you sad. You need to watch out. Maybe you don't want to be close friend with her anymore. Just play with her, but you don't need to emotionally depend on her." And it's really hard to teach it for kids, but with repetition, with time, she's gonna grow up and know that.
I think what you're describing are the tiny little things. I like to call them the learning moments that parents are exposed to, but we don't really pay attention to. We kind of think, yeah, everybody's child goes through moments where they're challenged in making friends, but it's important to take those little learning moments and try to use them and help children to understand, well, listen, you really want to pay attention to what that's like and what is making you want to remain friends with that person. What are some of the common challenges that you're noticing in your work when you meet other fathers? Because I think, again, we don't hear enough about fathers and their emotional feelings and raising their children. We tend to focus more on mothers and what mothers are feeling. So what are some of the common challenges that you're hearing about in your circle of clients or friends who are fathers?
The biggest challenge is actually for fathers to be aware how important their role is and how important they can influence their daughters or kids in general. Most of us, the fathers, were not even aware about our importance of our role as fathers. And unfortunately, the media, the pop culture is not helping at all. It's actually keep underestimating our important role. But like, I have so many stats, they're not on hand right now, but like, I have so many stats, for example, about the states, United States of America, showing, how the kids performing when they had father figure in their life versus if they were raised in a fatherless um, homes. Like, the stats are really scary. How much of them they actually don't manage to get to school if they don't have father figure in their life. I think 4 out of 5 uh, mm, um, 4 out of 5 young kids in prison are coming from fatherless homes. It's really scary. So I think the biggest challenge starts with letting dads know you actually matter, your role matters. For me, when I started learning about this, I was overwhelmed myself by, oh my god, like, am I that I can be that influential to my daughter? So it was overwhelming, then it was really brightening experience. I was really excited. I was like, oh my God, I finally don't feel I'm lost. For the first time, I started feeling I have kind of control over my daughter's future. For example, I learned that my daughter, she's gonna grow up and she's gonna pick her future partner based on me. I'm gonna be her reference. So that made me to set the bar high for myself, for my personal standards, how I eat in front of her, how I work out, how I do things. And it turned me actually to a monster in a good way. I'm working out all the time. This past summer, I had really great experience. I signed up for my first ever triathlon and I finished it. But it was very rewarding experience. But I don't know if you saw that post on my Instagram page. I posted a picture of me, my wife took for me at the finisher line, and it shows my daughter standing and watching me. And I said, what is, finishing a triathlon and training for it for the first time is very rewarding. But what was even more rewarding is for my daughter. She was with me from day one. I told her, Salma, I'm gonna sign up for a triathlon. I'm freaking out, but you know what? Let's do it. And she saw me every day training, running, cycling, swimming. She came with me and her mom every time I go to the lake to train in the open water. She saw that I discovered that I have phobia from open waters. She saw me. I would go in the water, stand up for 10 minutes, staring in the water, then jumping after I'm terrified, and I come back and I explain to her, you know what? I'm terrified. I'm scared to death, but I did it. And she waited for me at the finishing line and saw me going through that experience. This is priceless. This is, for me, it's the most rewarding thing. But for me, knowing I can influence her in that way, it pushed me to do it. If I didn't do it, maybe I would think, it doesn't matter. Whatever I'm gonna do, she doesn't care. Especially girls. So I focus about daughters because I have a daughter. I don't have son yet. So especially daughters, they look, that's their heroes. They're their first love. So she look up for me, and she always want to see me. She even excel in front of me. Daughters, you probably know this. Daughters take their moms for granted, but they don't take their fathers for granted. She always, always whenever she screw up with anything, if she, get, even like she drop a glass of juice in her room, she makes sure, I don't know, she go to her mom, because in front of me, she want to excel. She want to show me she's better, she pushes herself. At the same time, I always try to maintain healthy communication where I want her to make mistakes in front of me. I don't want her to be afraid of making mistakes in front of me. I actually encourage her to try, and if she fails, it's okay, But yeah, fathers, we have a huge influence, especially on our daughters. So the first step starts with knowing that we have this power. Once we know it, as you can see, we can use it. We can take it to the next level.
So now I want to take you back on memory lane. I want to take you back. I think it's important that parents also remember that our journey in through parenthood is the consequence of our learning about how to be a parent. So I know you touched on that right at the beginning, and saying that when you were growing up, you knew that you wanted to be a great dad, and you didn't know what kind, but you knew what you didn't want to do. And that was looking back at some of your own experiences. But now that you've come through this and you're on your journey through parenthood, you obviously recognize that nobody teaches us to be parents. We kind of learn on the job, don't we? Like you said, it can be really overwhelming to find a book. I think one of the greatest blessings that we have in this generation is access to people's stories, or access to specialists who are very openly talking. And then, of course, with social media being as accessible as it is, it's easier today for a parent to come across a profile like yours and understand that we're not alone on that journey. So looking back at your parents, at how your relationship was with your father, and I mention your father because you mentioned him right at the beginning. What do you think now about what he didn't know, or how he didn't know to do the things that you know today? For example, very often I'll tell my children, listen, I'm your mom and I do my very best, but I'm human and sometimes I'm not very skillful at what I do. And in saying that, it helps them to see me on that human level. But I know when I was growing up, my parents were not accustomed to having those types of conversations with their children. It was almost like you said, it was that you respect your elders, and that's just the way that young people were raised. So we know that our parents didn't have the access that we have to support, to parenting support, to understanding our feelings. So I think it's important that we look back and find moments of empathy with those who raised us because I don't think we can be empowered parents if we're unable to look back at how we were raised and say, you know what, they did their best. Are you able to do that now that you're a father? Are you able to look back and say, you know what, they didn't get it right all the time. I didn't understand. But what I know now is that they didn't, nobody taught them how to be parents. They kind of learned the way that I'm learning.
Exactly, exactly. So actually, when I first started, uncovering my childhood traumas with my therapist, at the beginning, I went through that anger phase where I was angry at my dad specifically because I started realizing how the ways he dealt with me, ended up in, getting me some discomfort or maybe traumatize me in a way or another. But again, as you said, the more I learn, I had to process that for some time. But then I realized, like, he didn't know any better. Like, he didn't have any resources like we do. There were not any books, any online courses, no Instagram, no social media pages to tell you how to be a good dad. And um, so, like, this is a tricky situation, I think. So one of my mantras I keep saying is, what is worse than an abusive parent is an abusive one with good intentions. And I believe that was my case. So, like, my dad, he only did that because he wanted to push me to be a better person. He always made me feel I'm not good enough, but because he wanted to push me, but he didn't know that's gonna scar me from the inside. There was nothing called like trauma or emotions, or these talks didn't even exist. So he definitely did that the best he had. And my part and my responsibility with all this knowledge first to help other dads, because until this day, as I told you, many dads, they're not even aware how influential their role can be on their daughters. So I need to first educate them how they can positively or negatively affect their kids, and then how to do it the right way. And it's not rocket science, it's really easy. Just you need some pointers and some steps to follow. But yeah, once I so before I process all of this, my relationship with my dad was really awkward. When I sit with him, like, I don't know how to talk to him, how I was confused. I didn't even, because I was not even aware of my own emotions. But once I processed these, I know my dad, he himself went through a lot. So one of the things, kind of excuses for my dad. So my grandparent, who is my dad's father, lived his whole life abroad. He was working in Kuwait while his family in Jordan. So my dad grew up without a father, technically. He would only see his father a year in the summer break. So I think as reaction to that, he overstepped into his son's life. He was overstepping, over controlling, because probably it was a reaction. So once I started, making these realizations, I started becoming less angry. And finally, once I started putting myself in his shoes, I could see. And even until today, I'm not perfect. Sometimes I snap on my daughter. Sometimes I just I make mistakes. I'll always do it. I'm never gonna be perfect. So I'm not perfect. Who am I to judge my dad or anyone else? So yeah. So yeah. I hope I answered your
Yeah,
question.
no, it's such a learning moment, isn't it? When we can look back and say, wow, I think children do this a lot, especially teenagers, constantly judging parents for being good or not being good, or being fair and not being fair. But it's only until you get to a certain stage in your life and a certain ability to be very aware and awaken that you can look back and say, wow, how did they do that without the kind of support that we have today?
Exactly.
I'm so conscious of our time, and I know that we're going to be bringing this to an end. Malek, what do you want people to remember about this interview? What is the most important walkaway that you want our audience to remember?
Um, I think the most thing I want people to remember is to work on being resilient, and to work on that. I actually wrote some bullet point I'd like to read, because I've been reflecting and preparing to this interview about what I call resiliency, and what drove me to where I am right now and led me to where I am now. So first, as we discussed earlier, in my opinion, resiliency is going through hard times, crises, or adversities, and coming a better person on the other side. Even on Wikipedia, they use in the definition, going through crisis, but going back to where you were before the crisis. I don't believe that's resiliency, because nobody go through crisis and they come back the same. We always either grow, and that's the positive option, or it can scar us. But for me, what led me to be where I am now, which I'm really happy. I still think I'm still starting to tip on my potential, but I only got here through self-awareness, through focusing on what I can control, through building mental toughness. This is something I mindfully worked on for years: how to build mental toughness, how to build personal boundaries. This was a very big one for me. Surrounding myself with people who gonna make me a better person, people who are where I wanna be. And one of the things I actually struggled most of my life, I was taking advices from the wrong people. And an easy tip for that is just look at the person you're taking advice from. Are they where you want to be? Or look at their lifestyle. Are they doing the lifestyle you want to go with? So this was really hard one for me when I quit my job 4 months ago. So a friend of me who helped me when I got my last job, he was against me quitting it, and he really gave me a hard time for it. But I did it anyway because I knew what I wanted to do. But now I reflect on it, like, he is just giving me advice based on the lifestyle he likes, but I don't like his lifestyle. I didn't plan to stay 9 to 5 for the rest of my life. He's planning to do it. So this is a very important one. And finally, not caring about what people think about us. When I came to Canada and started delivering pizza, people thought I lost my mind. I left my dad's companies, and I left my car and my apartment and came here, start from scratch. But I knew what I wanted, and I'm happy I didn't listen to people. So yeah, I think these are very important things I'd love people to remember and go after. And there's amazing online resources for all these things I mentioned.
Malek, when I'm talking to you, I see a confident, resilient, kind, loving father, husband, and man. What do you see when you look in the mirror?
First, thank you. And for most of my life, I didn't feel that, for sure. I never thought I was, special in any way. My grades at school were really mediocre. Even I graduated from university with GPA 2.04 from 4. And for most of my life, I didn't even think I am smart or even talented. But thankfully, after years of self-development and, believing in myself, I learned that we all the same, and we only, these people who become successful, become resilient, are the people who put in the work. So my self-confidence definitely increased, and I believe self-confidence increases through going through adversities and overcoming them. And it also comes from, meeting the promises we make to ourselves, and actually do them. So if I promise myself I'm gonna work out 3 days a week, if I do them, that's gonna boost my self-confidence. If I say, okay, I gotta read 10 pages every day, once I start doing that, that gives it a bit booster. But for most of my life, I was insecure, I was scared, I was lacking confidence, and I struggled a lot. I struggled to keep employments because of it, because I keep beating myself down, self-blame, feeling guilty and shameful the whole time, even though nobody said anything, but just it's all like in my mind. So yeah, right now when I look in the mirror, I accept where I came from and I thank it because it made me who I am. If I didn't go through those adversities and challenges and traumas, I wouldn't be where I am right now. And yeah, I just keep promise to myself I'm never gonna be the same person again. I'll just keep getting better, and I'm on a journey to go after the best version of myself every day.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Malek. Thank you for being here and for sharing parts of your experience of life. And where can we find you if we want to learn more about the journey of resilient fathers?
So for now, I'm on Instagram at real Malek Jabari. I can send it to you if you like to put it in the video description. And soon I'm going to have my website live, which is mightydaughters.com. It's still not live yet. I need to finalize the program. Once we launch it, the website is going to be live. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well and Facebook.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of another incredible conversation. Today we were speaking with Malek, who's based out in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week when we bring another incredible guest to Strong.